Now let's actually discuss what happened in that showdown between Ann Taylor and the state's prosecution. And is Ann Taylor using these public hearings to fuel more speculation or suspicion? Well, yes, and I'm going to get into why, as it's clearly evident. Now, Ann Taylor was arguing that she wanted the hearing on the 14th of May to be open to the public, going on about Bryan's Sixth Amendment rights, and how the prosecution are trying to keep this case in a vacuum so that they can control the narrative and so on. But the prosecution wanted this sealed simply because there's information that has been sealed from the public, and that the public would be receiving this information in a completely out of context manner, because everything else has been sealed, and it's only specifically this that Ann Taylor wants the public to see, which will only create more speculation from the public and just help fuel the fire to any current conspiracy theorists. So let's just start off with Ann Taylor's remark. Her remark was that the prosecution haven't replied to her previous motions. Now, Ann Taylor was never saying this to the judge or the prosecution specifically. Ann Taylor was saying this directly to the cameras. And this was something for the public to hear, as they all knew with this statement that she was wrong. And it was clear that she's trying to continue to push this idea that the state are withholding evidence from the defense. Even at one point saying, what are the state trying to hide? Now, the judge actually had to stop Ann Taylor from making this remark because the judge can see both sides. He can see that the defense have filed motions to the prosecution, but he can also see that the prosecution have responded to these requests, and that he stated himself that the state aren't actually hiding anything, and that they have replied to these motions. It's just that what Ann wants is exempt from discovery, and she herself knows that and is just dragging her feet in the mud trying to get it. The other part that Ann is requesting is from the FBI, and this is something that the prosecution are not holding back. It's just that, again, as Ann Taylor already knows, nobody bar the FBI has that information yet. So the prosecution can't hand over something to the defense that they themselves don't yet have. It's literally that simple, and they've made the response that when they get this discovery filed through from the FBI regarding the information that the defense wants, the prosecution will immediately hand it over to them. But again, they can't give it if they just don't have it. And this request mainly relies on DNA and its use in genetic genealogy, even though the DNA processed and used in the genealogy wasn't used to obtain any warrants on Bryan Kohberger. There were other areas of evidence that they themselves honed in on, meaning that the DNA wasn't necessarily used, not until Bryan Kohberger was apprehended. And when Bryan Kohberger was apprehended, they matched the DNA found on the sheath of the murder weapon to that of the man that's currently in question. But the FBI's evidence goes through a process of its own before it's even released to anyone else. And one of the issues with DNA in a case like this is the timeline in which it can take for testing. Dependent on what they're testing and how much of it they're testing from the crime scene, this could literally take years to complete. So something to take, for example, would be like bloodstains found at the crime scene and then spending years trying to find foreign blood, i.e. Bryan Kohberger's blood, inside of that. There's loads of processes that they can use to break this down, but the time consumption in doing so can create a massive issue here. But the cutoff point for this discovery request is September. So after September, whatever they have is whatever they have to go with at that point. The same way that if they'd gone ahead and had this trial like it was originally planned in October, they would have had to have gone with whatever information / evidence they had back then. But because Bryan Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial, they were able to keep the process going to continue bringing in more evidence and information. So fuck this, let's break this down for a minute, because I'm not holding back. The judge in this case is quite literally taking the piss, because he's literally just giving the defense a chance to run fucking rings around everyone. And it seems like the judge is trying to make everyone happy. Spoiler alert, you can't do that. There are times that you're going to piss the prosecution off. There are times that you're going to piss the defense off. And there are times that you're going to piss the public off. And that's because there's public interest in this case. But you have to remember to keep the main focus and interest at heart here, which is the 4 victims that were murdered almost 18 months ago. And the fact that we're no closer to a trial date 18 months into this case, as Ann Taylor continues to drag this case out, and I'm going to prove it. So on May 14th and May 16th, there are 2 hearings that were meant to take place that have now been cancelled last minute. Ann Taylor wanted the hearing on May the 14th to be open to the public. She's argued that the prosecution are hiding evidence and keeping these hearings in a vacuum, as she put it. And this goes against her client's Sixth Amendment rights. But she wanted the hearing on the 16th of May closed to the public. And that's more than likely because she has information under seal that she wants to bring in. The difference is that she doesn't want whatever it is that she's going to bring in on May the 16th to be seen by the public. Whereas the one on May the 14th is completely different. And it's on that one she's saying is the one that goes against her client's Sixth Amendment rights. But her client's rights are nowhere to be seen come the 16th of May. So the long and short of that is, if Ann Taylor for her client wants to do that, argue to keep one hearing open knowing it fuels speculation onto the prosecution by giving out random information in a hearing, that's completely fine, but she doesn't seem to want to give the prosecution the same ability to do so. So it's one rule for Ann Taylor and another for everyone else. Another thing that she said, which I find super interesting here, the defense in this case have been saying for months that the prosecution haven't been giving them everything. They filed motions to do so, but they haven't received a response, claiming that the state are hiding something, in which the judge corrected Ann by saying that that wasn't true. The prosecution stated to the defense that they have everything the prosecution has and they know it. And once they get these bits of information that they're asking for, like from the FBI for example, they will give it over to them. It's just that they haven't received it yet, which I find super interesting here, because if I was in that prosecution team, I would have had a fucking field day at this point. Rather than kind of like arguing my own credibility like Bill Thompson did, getting himself all worked up and prompting the judge to ask both sides to calm it down, meaning that Ann Taylor got out her fishing rod, went back, cast that line, allowing Bill Thompson to bite hard on the bait so that Ann Taylor could simply just sit back and reel him on in. I, in that case, would have responded with something like this. To Ann Taylor and her defense team, we asked to go to trial all the way back in October, as well as filed to go to trial at some point of this year. And you made the case that you couldn't, because at that point, you complained that the prosecution have given you too much evidence and information, and that you can't possibly go to trial on those proposed dates, because it will take more than a year alone to get through some of the information that you said that you've received. So when it comes to setting a trial date, you have far too much evidence and information to go through to get there in time. But when it comes to these hearings, you have too little information and evidence and have had things hidden from you. Which one is it, Anne? Because you can't have both. She's at one point claiming that she has too much information, but on the other hand claiming she has loads of it hidden from her. She states that she needs the hearing open to the public on May the 14th, but needs it closed on May the 16th, as well as every other hearing up until now that she's had closed and has had no problem sealing up until now. And I actually find it unfair that the judge has even considered having this hearing open to the public, because Ann Taylor is again going to get the chance to show off to the cameras. And I can bet money now she's going to drop some information in there that's going to have the cameras immediately cut, with the hearing then proceeding behind closed doors, only having the public to have some kind of speculative theory as to what Ann Taylor was actually going on about. Like, let me give you one thing in this case that I find laughable with the conspiracy theories and so on. There is so much information and evidence that we don't have any access to. Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger know what it is the prosecution have against her client. They know what they've got. And in the 18 plus months so far, a well-respected, high-paid lawyer of roughly around $7,000 a week cannot come up with a justifiable defense. It took 18 plus months. And Cy Ray, an expert in cellular data, who's already under fire from a judge in Colorado because his work is questionable, says that he might have been in a certain area at 2:47 a.m. in the morning, yet can't give us, all the prosecution, the specifics into where Bryan was at the time when the crimes were being committed, whereas the defense in this case want all of that information from the FBI. One rule for Ann Taylor and another one for everyone else. I hope you enjoyed some of this video. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, and I even hope that some of this information could help you out, as things that go on inside of the courtroom and the public's perception are two very different things from that of what are going to take place moving forward. Drop a follow and a like as it really helps out the channel, and have a great day.